Welcome to Crime Story with Camila, where we dive deep into the most chilling and mysterious true crime cases. If you love real-life crime stories, make sure to like, subscribe, and share so you never miss an update. Your support helps us bring you the most in-depth investigations and untold stories. This is the story of a small New Hampshire town shaken to its core. A home, a family, a single night that left a community trying to understand how everything could end so suddenly. On the evening of August 18th, 2025, the quiet town of Madbury, New Hampshire was shattered by a call no community ever expects. At around dusk, state police responded to a welfare check at a home on Moheramet Drive, a street known for its stillness, its safety, and its close-knit families. Neighbors reported that the house had been unusually silent throughout the day. No lights turned on, no movement inside, and no response to repeated knocks at the door. Concern grew, and eventually someone contacted authorities. That single call set in motion a chain of events that would reveal a tragedy beyond imagination. On the evening officers entered the home, what they found inside was devastating. For members of the Long family, 48-year-old Ryan, 34-year-old Emily, and two young children, 8-year-old Parker and 6-year-old Ryan, were discovered deceased. Officials immediately confirmed that all 4 victims had suffered fatal gunshot wounds. The scene was sealed off as investigators worked quickly to determine what had happened and whether any danger remained for the public. But in the midst of the tragedy, authorities made one unexpected and emotional discovery: a toddler, alive and unharmed. The child was found inside the home during the initial sweep by police. New Hampshire State Police confirmed the toddler was removed safely and immediately placed into the care of relatives. Within hours, law enforcement shared the first official update. There was no threat to the community. The deaths appeared to be contained within the home, and early indicators suggested the incident was an apparent suicide, though investigators stressed that a full forensic examination and autopsies were required before confirming any final conclusions. Outside the home, neighbors gathered silently behind police tape. Journalists arrived. Emergency vehicles lined the street. For a town of fewer than 2,000 residents, the loss felt personal, intimate. This wasn't just another headline. It was a family known in the community, a tragedy unfolding just steps away from everyday life. Madbury would never be the same. Evening of August 18th, 2025, the quiet town of Madbury, New Hampshire was shattered by a call no community ever expects. At around dusk, state police responded to a welfare check at a home on Moheramet Drive, a street known for its stillness, its safety, and its close-knit families. Neighbors reported that the house had been unusually silent throughout the day. No lights turned on, no movement inside, and no response to repeated knocks at the door. Concern grew, and eventually someone contacted authorities. That single call set in motion a chain of events that would reveal a tragedy beyond imagination. Ryan Long, 48, was known as a hardworking professional who spent years in the tech and engineering field. He was described by former co-workers as intelligent, quiet, and deeply private. His wife, those who knew him say, he kept to himself, but was dedicated to providing for his family. Millie Long, 34, was remembered as warm, nurturing, and heavily involved in her children's school activities. She was known for volunteering at local events and was often seen walking the kids to the nearby Moheramet Elementary School. Friends described her as a gentle soul and a mother who loved her children fiercely. Their children, 8-year-old Parker and 6-year-old Ryan, were energetic, curious, and well-loved by teachers and classmates. The school district released a statement mourning the loss, describing the boys as bright, caring, and full of potential, the kind of students who left a lasting mark on everyone they met. The Longs were not a family that drew attention. They enjoyed outdoor activities, neighborhood gatherings, and quiet weekends at home. For many in Madbury, their deaths felt unthinkable because this was a family seen as stable, present at school functions, on the sidelines of soccer practice, and at local parks. But beneath the calm surface, there were signs, small, quiet indications, that something deeper might have been wrong. According to investigators, the family had been dealing with significant stress before the tragedy. The public would later learn more about these pressures, but in the days before the incident, nothing outwardly suggested violence was imminent. After the initial discovery, investigators immediately began reconstructing the final hours of the Long family. Working through evidence inside the home, autopsy results, and digital records, authorities slowly built a clearer picture of what happened and when. The timeline begins the evening before the bodies were found. According to officials, the Long family had no phone or in-person contact with relatives or friends after late Sunday night. By Monday morning, neighbors noticed the home was unusually quiet. No one left for work. The children, who normally played in the yard, were nowhere to be seen. Based on early findings from the New Hampshire Attorney General's office, the deaths likely occurred sometime overnight or in the early morning hours before police arrived. Autopsy reports confirmed that all 4 victims died from gunshot wounds, and investigators quickly determined that there were no signs of forced entry, no struggle, and no evidence of an intruder. Inside the home, investigators found a single firearm, legally owned, near the body of 48-year-old Ryan Long. This became a key piece of evidence. Ballistics testing would later show that this weapon was used in all of the fatal shootings. The Attorney General's office announced there was no indication that anyone outside the family was involved. Within days, the official findings were released. The case was ruled a murder-suicide, with authorities identifying Ryan Long as the shooter. The autopsies confirmed that Emily and the 2 boys died from homicide, while Ryan's death was ruled a suicide. Officials stated firmly that the tragedy unfolded entirely within the home and that the public was never in danger. One of the most significant details in the timeline was the presence of a toddler found alive in the home. Authorities believe the child survived because the shootings occurred in a different part of the house. The toddler remained alone for several hours until police arrived, an element investigators described as miraculous. By the end of the first week, state police announced the investigation was largely complete. While the exact motive required deeper examination, which would continue in the following weeks, the sequence of events was clear. The tragedy happened quickly, unexpectedly, and without external involvement. Investigators believe the child survived because the shootings took place in another area of the house, and the toddler was likely asleep during the incident. When police entered, they found the child frightened, dehydrated, and in need of immediate care, but alive. First responders described the moment as emotional, emphasizing how miraculous it was for the toddler to have endured hours alone. Police confirmed the toddler was placed in the custody of extended family members within hours. Social services, trauma specialists, and child welfare experts stepped in to ensure the child received both physical and emotional support. Authorities emphasized that protecting the toddler's privacy is now a top priority. While the child is too young to fully understand what happened, professionals warn that exposure to such an environment can have long-term effects. Counselors, psychologists, and trained therapists will continue working with the family to provide stability, routine, and ongoing trauma-informed care. The surviving toddler represents not only the fragility of the moment, but the lasting impact tragedies like this leave behind. As the community rallies around the child, investigators shift focus to understanding how the Long family reached such a breaking point. As news of the Long family tragedy spread, the small town of Madbury was engulfed in grief. This was a community where everyone knew one another, where families waved at neighbors from their driveways and children played together at the local elementary school. The loss of 4 lives shook the town at its core. Neighbors described the atmosphere in the days that followed as silent, a heaviness that lingered in the air. Parents held their children closer. Schools brought in grief counselors. And conversations about mental health, stress, and domestic violence rippled through community centers, churches, and classrooms. Madbury is a small place, and when something like this happens, the pain is shared by everyone. Within 48 hours, a candlelight vigil was organized outside the Long family home. Neighbors, classmates, teachers, and local officials gathered as the sun set. Candles flickered along the sidewalk. Flowers, stuffed animals, and handwritten notes formed a growing memorial beneath the front yard tree. At Moheramet Elementary School, where the 2 boys were students, teachers created a quiet room for children struggling to cope. Artwork, sympathy cards, and memory boards filled the walls, each one a tribute to Parker and Ryan. The school district released statements honoring the boys' kindness, curiosity, and bright spirits. Local churches also held services dedicated to the family, offering space for reflection and collective mourning. For a town as tight-knit as Madbury, healing will take time. But even in the midst of grief, the community showed unity, standing together to honor the victims, support the surviving toddler, and confront the difficult conversations tragedies like this force into the open. As the investigation continued, state officials were pressed with one haunting question: why did this happen? What could have driven a husband and father, someone with no prior violent criminal history, to kill his wife, his young daughter, and then himself? The New Hampshire Attorney General's office addressed this directly. While they confirmed the sequence of events and the cause of death, they made it clear that a perfect motive may never be fully known. But they did identify several key factors that shaped investigators' understanding of the tragedy. First, officials highlighted domestic violence indicators present within the home. Even though there were no public police reports or prior arrests involving the couple, investigators stated that domestic violence often happens in private, with no outward warning signs to neighbors or authorities. They emphasized that suicides of this type are typically rooted in a history of control, emotional volatility, or escalating conflict behind closed doors, even when there's no prior documentation. Second, investigators examined the couple's marital stress, an issue family and friends cautiously acknowledged. Reports suggested that the Longs had been navigating serious relationship problems, including frequent arguments and an increasingly tense home environment in the months leading up to the tragedy. While officials did not publicly confirm the exact nature of their disputes, they did state that the emotional climate inside the home could have played a significant role. Finally, investigators noted that suicide perpetrators often exhibit a pattern where the offender feels a catastrophic loss of control, combined with a distorted belief that ending the lives of family members is a form of protection or final control. They stopped short of confirming this psychological reasoning in Jeffrey Long's case, but the pattern matches what experts across the U.S. frequently document in family annihilation incidents. Still, despite these insights, authorities reaffirmed that the exact motive died with Jeffrey Long. The truth of what happened inside that home, and what he was thinking in his final moments, may never be known. But what is clear is that this tragedy fits into a broader pattern that domestic violence advocates warn about. When danger escalates, it often escalates suddenly, silently, and without witnesses. For the town of Madbury, the events of August 18th were a sudden and painful loss. For reporters, the case is a reminder of the responsibility to report accurately and compassionately. For viewers, it is an urgent call to look out for our neighbors and to know the signs of someone in crisis. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger or thinking about harming themselves or others, call your local emergency number. In the U.S., call or text 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. For information about supporting survivors of violent loss, visit resources in the video description.
Thanks for watching. For more interesting videos, please subscribe.